The cold evening wind moved across the empty desert land, carrying dust and dry leaves along with it. The sky was turning dark fast, and the last bit of sunlight was fading behind the rocky hills. Nayeli, a young Apache girl, walked slowly across the uneven ground. Her legs were shaking from exhaustion, and her eyes felt heavy after a long day of fear and confusion. She had been separated from her group during a sudden desert storm, and now she had no idea where she was. Her heart beat fast every time she looked around and saw nothing but open space and deep shadows. Nayeli wrapped her thin blanket tightly around herself, hoping it would protect her from the cold wind. She had been walking since morning, hoping she would find someone or something, a trail, a clue, or a familiar path. But the desert remained silent, and the emptiness only made her fear grow bigger. Her stomach felt tight from hunger, and her throat was dry from thirst. Every few steps, she felt her knees shaking as if they could give up any moment. Still, she tried to stay strong because she believed that giving up meant danger. Far away, the sound of a horse's hooves touched the quiet land. Nayeli froze. She didn't know if it was friend or enemy. She stood behind a broken wooden fence, hoping to stay hidden. Her heart pounded as she tried to remain still. The sound grew louder, and soon she saw a cowboy riding a brown horse. He wore a long, dark coat, a wide-brimmed hat, and his face looked tired after a long day of travel. His name was Caleb, a man who usually kept to himself and lived a quiet life on a small ranch miles away from town. Caleb slowed his horse when he noticed something strange near the fence. It looked like a small figure, sitting or leaning there. At first, he thought it might be an animal. But the closer he got, the more he realized it was a person. He gently pulled the reins, making his horse stop. Nayeli looked up with wide, frightened eyes. She stepped back a little, as if preparing to run. Caleb raised his hands peacefully, trying not to scare her. "It's all right," he said softly, keeping his voice gentle. "I'm not here to harm you." Nayeli didn't speak at first. Her lips were dry, and her whole body was stiff from fear and exhaustion. Caleb noticed the cuts on her hands and the strain on her face. He could see she had been through a lot. He stepped down from his horse and kept a respectful distance, not wanting to overwhelm her. "You look hurt," he said calmly, "and it's getting cold. Do you need help?" For a moment, Nayeli didn't know what to do. Her mind told her to run, but her body didn't have the strength. She could barely keep herself standing. Caleb waited patiently, knowing that forcing anything would only frighten her more. After a long silence, Nayeli finally whispered that she had been lost since the storm and could not find her people. Caleb nodded, understanding the situation. The desert could be deadly during the night. He knew she wouldn't survive long without shelter, food, and warmth. "My ranch is not far," he said. "You can stay for one night, just until morning. I promise, you will be safe there." Nayeli hesitated. She studied his face carefully. He looked tired, but calm, and there was no sign of cruelty or anger in his eyes. She knew she needed help, and even though trusting a stranger felt frightening, she didn't have another choice. Slowly, she nodded. Caleb helped her climb onto his horse, making sure she was comfortable and steady. She held onto the saddle, and the horse began to move. As they traveled, the desert became darker, and stars appeared one by one in the sky. Nayeli felt a strange mix of fear and relief. She had been alone for hours, and now someone was helping her reach safety. She wondered why a stranger would bother saving her. People rarely helped without expecting something in return, but Caleb didn't ask for anything. When they reached the ranch, dim lantern light glowed from inside the small wooden house. The place looked old, but peaceful. Caleb guided his horse into the yard and gently helped Nayeli down. She could barely keep her balance, so he kept a careful hand near her, not touching her unless she stumbled. He unlocked the door and led her inside. where the air was warmer. The ranch house was simple. A wooden table sat near the window. A small stove stood in the corner, and a bed rested against the far wall. Everything looked clean and neat. Caleb quickly lit another lantern to brighten the room. Nayeli stood quietly near the door, unsure if she should step farther in. She felt a little out of place, but Caleb gave her a reassuring smile. "You can sit," he said gently. "Let me bring you something warm." He heated some stew on the stove and brought her a bowl. The smell alone made her eyes water, because she hadn't eaten since yesterday. She whispered, "Thank you," before taking small bites. Each spoonful warmed her tired body, and she felt her fear slowly calming down. Caleb filled a cup with clean water and handed it to her. Nayeli drank carefully, not wanting to seem greedy even though she wanted to finish it in one gulp. He didn't ask many questions at first. He knew she needed rest more than anything. After she finished her meal, Caleb brought her a clean blanket and pointed toward the small bed prepared near the fireplace. "You can sleep here. I'll stay by the door in case you need anything, or if you feel unsafe." Nayeli didn't understand why he was being so considerate. Most people would never offer this much kindness to a stranger, especially to someone from a different world. She lay down slowly, feeling the softness of the blanket and the warmth of the fire. Her eyes began to close, but her mind was full of thoughts. She wondered who Caleb really was. Why was he alone? Why was he helping her? And what would happen tomorrow, when she tried to find her people again? She felt a small fear in her chest, but it wasn't fear of Caleb. It was fear of being lost again. Fear of waking up to another day of uncertainty. Caleb quietly sat in a chair near the door, keeping watch. He looked at the girl sleeping lightly and felt a sense of responsibility. She was brave, stronger than she realized, but she was also young and vulnerable in the wild desert. He didn't know why he felt such a strong need to protect her, but he did. Maybe it was because he saw the fear in her eyes earlier and didn't want her to go through the night alone. Maybe it was because he remembered what it felt like to lose someone who needed help. The house was quiet except for the crackling fire. Nayeli shifted under the blanket, feeling the warmth wrap around her. She whispered a soft word in Apache, something that sounded like gratitude. Even though Caleb didn't understand the language, he could feel its meaning. As the night grew deeper, both felt something unspoken settling in the room. It wasn't fear or tension. It was something gentler. Trust slowly forming, and an invisible thread tying their fates together. Neither of them knew how much this one night would change their lives. Nayeli finally drifted into peaceful sleep, feeling safe for the first time since the storm. Caleb continued watching over her, staring out the window at the quiet desert and thinking that tomorrow would bring answers. But he also knew that tonight, fate had brought a stranger to his door not by accident, but for a reason he didn't yet understand. And in that quiet moment, everything began to change. Morning light slowly entered the small ranch house, touching the wooden floor with a soft golden glow. Birds chirped outside, and the faint sound of horses moving in the corral brought life to the quiet place. Nayeli opened her eyes slowly, confused for a moment as she tried to remember where she was. Then she saw the warm fire in the corner, the lantern on the table, and the cowboy sitting on the chair near the door, half asleep but still watching over her. Everything came back to her: the storm, getting lost, and the stranger who had helped her. Caleb blinked awake the moment he heard movement. He straightened up and offered her a gentle smile. "You're awake," he said softly. "How are you feeling?" Nayeli sat up slowly. Her body still ached from the long hours she had spent wandering in the desert, but she felt much better than yesterday. I am better," she replied quietly. Her voice was soft, still unsure, but there was a small comfort in her tone now. Caleb stood and moved toward the stove. "I kept some food ready. Thought you might be hungry again." He poured warm broth into a small bowl and placed it on the table. The smell drifted through the room, inviting and calming. Nayeli moved closer, sitting carefully, trying to keep a polite distance. She still didn't fully understand him, but she sensed no danger in his actions. As she ate slowly, Caleb prepared water for her to wash her hands and face. Nayeli felt surprised by his thoughtfulness. In her world, kindness always came with purpose, yet this cowboy treated her with simple humanity. When she finished eating, she folded her hands in her lap and looked at him with a grateful expression. "Thank you," she whispered. Caleb nodded as if it were nothing. "You should rest today. We'll start searching for your people tomorrow morning. You need full strength before we travel far." Nayeli hesitated before speaking again. "You do not have to help me so much." Caleb leaned against the counter, crossing his arms quietly. "Maybe not, but I want to. The desert isn't easy to survive alone. It's safer to stick together until you're back home." Nayeli lowered her gaze, touched by the sincerity in his voice. She wasn't used to such simple, honest words. Most people only gave help after receiving something in return. She wondered again why this cowboy was different. Caleb noticed her uncertainty and tried to make her feel more at ease. "It's okay," he said. "You're safe here. I'll keep my word." After breakfast, Nayeli offered to help around the ranch, even though she was still injured. At first, Caleb refused, saying she needed rest, but she insisted it was her way of showing respect. So he allowed her to feed the chickens while he fixed the horse saddle outside. She moved slowly, but carefully, wanting to prove that she wasn't a burden. The sun climbed higher, warming the land. The ranch felt peaceful, and Nayeli found herself liking the quiet. Everything moved, at a gentle pace here. Caleb worked in silence, and she could hear him humming a soft tune from time to time. Later, she gathered water from the well. The bucket was heavier than she expected, and she struggled, nearly losing her balance. Caleb quickly stepped beside her and held the handle, steadying the weight without touching her directly. "You don't have to do this," he said softly. "You're supposed to rest." Nayeli looked up at him with determined eyes. "I want to help. I do not want to just sit. Helping makes me feel stronger." Caleb understood that. He gave a small nod and let her assist with light tasks. Working together created a quiet bond between them, something calm yet meaningful. It was as if each small action built a bridge between two very different worlds. By noon, the warm breeze passed through the ranch, carrying the smell of hay and earth. Nayeli sat on a wooden step, watching Caleb repair a broken fence post. He worked with steady hands, focused and patient. She noticed that even though he didn't talk much, his actions showed more kindness than most words could. After a while, Caleb took a break and sat a few feet away from her. "Did you sleep well?" he asked. She nodded. "Better than I have in the last days." "That's good," he replied. "You looked exhausted when I found you. You must have walked a long way." Nayeli stared at the ground, remembering the long, lonely hours she spent crossing the desert. "I thought I would not make it," she admitted softly. "Everything was cold. Every shadow frightened me." Caleb listened carefully. "But you did make it," he said. "That means you're stronger than you think." Nayeli looked at him, surprised by his words. No one had said something like that to her before. Strength, to her people, was usually shown through skill, bravery, or survival. But Caleb saw her strength differently, not in loud moments, but in her silent endurance. As the afternoon passed, they continued working quietly. Nayeli swept the floor of the small stable and brushed the horse gently. The animal responded warmly to her touch, making her smile for the first time since the storm. Caleb noticed her smile, and it warmed something inside him. When evening approached, the wind settled, and the sky turned orange. Caleb boiled potatoes and cooked simple food on the stove, while Nayeli set the table. They ate together, slowly becoming more comfortable in each other's presence. It felt natural, like they had known each other longer than one night. After dinner, Caleb stepped outside to check the horses, while Nayeli stood near the doorway, watching the sunset. The colors painted the sky beautifully deep orange, soft pink, and hints of gold. She took a deep breath, feeling the calmness of the moment. Caleb returned and leaned against the porch rail. Nayeli quietly stepped beside him, maintaining a respectful distance. They watched the sky in silence for a while. "This land is different from where I grew up," Nayeli said softly. "So open." Caleb nodded. "It's peaceful. Sometimes lonely. But peaceful." Nayeli studied his expression. "Do you live alone here?" Caleb hesitated before answering. "Yes. It's just me." His voice had a calm sadness in it. Not heavy, but real. Nayeli didn't ask why. She could sense there was a story behind his loneliness, but she respected his silence. Instead, she said, "You helped me when you did not have to. I will remember this." Caleb looked at her with gentle honesty. Anyone with a heart would have done the same. Nayeli shook her head. "No, not everyone helps. Many pass by without looking back." Caleb didn't argue. He knew she was right, but he didn't want her to think too deeply about the cruelty of the world. So he simply said, "Well, you're safe now, and we'll find your people. I promise." Nayeli felt a quiet warmth in her chest. She wasn't sure what it meant, but she knew one thing: she trusted Caleb more today than she did yesterday. As the stars began to appear in the sky, Caleb lit a lantern on the porch. The soft glow surrounded them, and the cool evening breeze brushed past gently. Nayeli sat on the top step, while Caleb sat beside her at a comfortable distance. They talked about small things, about the horses, about the desert storms, about the sky. Their differences didn't matter in this moment. Their worlds, cultures, and languages were not barriers. They shared a quiet understanding, built not from words, but from kindness. By the time they returned inside, Nayeli felt a strange mix of comfort and uncertainty. She knew her journey was not finished. Tomorrow they would search for her people, and she would eventually return to her tribe. But she also knew something had changed today. Something gentle, something warm. Caleb prepared her sleeping place again, making sure the fire stayed warm. Nayeli lay down, feeling safer than she had felt in a long time. She whispered, "Good night." Caleb nodded. "Good night. Rest well." As Nayeli closed her eyes, she couldn't shake the feeling that this ranch, this cowboy, and this unexpected kindness were becoming important to her in a way she didn't yet understand. And outside, the desert night settled around them, calm and silent, as two lives slowly began to intertwine. The early morning sky was still dim when Caleb stepped outside to prepare the horses. The air was cold, and a thin layer of dew covered the ground. He moved quietly so he wouldn't wake Nayeli, but she was already awake, sitting on the edge of the bed with her blanket around her shoulders. She had barely slept. The thought of finding her people filled her with both hope and fear. She wanted to see them again, but she also feared what else the desert might hold. Caleb walked back inside and found her standing by the window, watching the sky slowly brighten. He noticed the worry in her eyes. "We'll ride out soon," he said gently. "I'll help you find the trail." "Some." Nayeli gave a small nod. And although she didn't feel steady inside, she trusted his words. She washed her face, tied her hair, and prepared herself for what might be a long day. Caleb handed her a piece of bread and a cup of warm tea, knowing she would need all the strength she could gather. After eating, she followed him outside. The horses were ready, Caleb's strong brown horse and a smaller one for her. She touched the horse's neck gently, whispering a quiet thank you to the animal. Caleb helped her mount carefully, making sure she didn't strain her injury. She held the reins with steady hands, though her heart felt unsteady. As they began riding, the sun slowly rose behind them, painting the sky in soft orange and yellow. The desert looked peaceful from afar, but both of them knew it could change quickly. Nayeli scanned the land, searching for signs of familiar trails. Her people were skilled travelers. They left markings on certain stones and trees to guide each other. She hoped she would find one soon. Caleb rode beside her, keeping his horse at a gentle pace. He didn't rush her or push her. Every few moments, he glanced at her to make sure she was doing all right. Nayeli noticed, and each time she saw his silent concern, a strange comfort settled in her heart. They reached the hills where she remembered losing her group. The ground was uneven and covered in loose stones. Nayeli asked Caleb to stop. She dismounted and kneeled near the rocks, studying the ground closely. Caleb stayed still, giving her space. After a moment, her eyes widened slightly. "There," she whispered, pointing to a faint footprint on the dust. "My people passed here." Caleb moved closer to look. He could barely see anything, but he trusted her sharp eyes. "Which direction?" he asked. Nayeli pointed toward the deeper part of the hills. "This way." But more footprints also follow them. Caleb didn't like the sound of that. "You mean someone else is tracking them?" She nodded slowly. "Yes. These are not Apache. The pattern is different." Caleb studied her expression carefully. Fear was starting to build in her again. He placed a steady hand near her, not touching but offering silent support. "We'll go carefully," he said, calmly. "I won't let anything happen to you." Together, they continued deeper into the hills. The air grew cooler, and the shadows stretched long across the ground. The land became rough, and sometimes they had to walk on foot, guiding their horses around sharp rocks. Nayeli searched for more signs, checking every tree trunk and stone. After an hour, she found a broken feather tied to a branch, a signal used by her tribe. Relief washed over her face, but only for a moment. Something else caught her attention. She touched the ground and noticed deeper boot marks overlapping the lighter tracks. Caleb crouched beside her. "These don't belong to your people," he said. Nayeli's voice trembled. Someone is following them, and they were close. Caleb's expression hardened with concern. "Then we shouldn't waste time." They mounted again and rode faster, carefully, but with purpose. The sky grew brighter, and the wind picked up, carrying the smell of dust. Nayeli kept searching, pointing out each sign: a bent branch, a trail of ash, a fresh fingerprint on a stone. Caleb admired how skilled she was, how her eyes noticed details he would have missed. At one point, the trail suddenly disappeared. Nayeli stopped, her heart pounding. She scanned the ground again and again, but the footprints faded over the hard, rocky floor. Panic slowly crept over her. "No," she whispered. "This is where I lost the storm's trail. What if—" Her voice broke slightly, and she looked like she was about to fall to her knees. Caleb quickly dismounted and came to her side. He didn't say anything at first. Instead, he gently placed his hand near her shoulder, just close enough to remind her she wasn't alone. "Take a breath," he said softly. "You've been guiding us all morning. You're doing well." Nayeli tried to calm her breathing. She closed her eyes and focused. She remembered how her people moved, how they chose their paths depending on weather. She walked slowly across the rocks, searching for clues. Caleb watched her silently, respecting her skill and giving her space to think. After a long moment, Nayeli suddenly pointed toward a narrow path between two tall boulders. "They would go there," she said. "It is sheltered from the wind, and the storm came from the west. They would hide here." Caleb smiled slightly. "Then that's our direction." They entered the narrow passage, guiding the horses on foot because the ground was tight and uneven. The passage opened into a more level area, with small bushes and a dry stream. Nayeli moved quickly, her eyes scanning the ground. Then, she saw it a small circle of stones, with warm ashes in the middle. They were here, she said with relief. Not long ago. Caleb knelt beside the ashes, feeling the warmth. Just a few hours. He looked at her with renewed hope. We're close. But the relief faded when Nayeli found deeper footprints near the stream. These weren't Apache footprints. They looked heavier, as if someone had been running or chasing. Her heart tightened. They were following my people. Caleb's expression grew serious. Don't jump to fear yet. We don't know for sure. But inside, Caleb felt tension too. His instincts warned him that danger might be near. They continued following the trail. The desert heat grew stronger, and both horses breathed heavily as they climbed small hills. Nayeli felt her legs shaking, but forced herself to keep going. She couldn't stop, not when she was so close. Caleb noticed her slowing down and offered her a drink. She took it gratefully. I am sorry, she whispered. I am slowing us. You're doing everything you can, Caleb replied. And that's enough. His voice gave her a spark of courage again. Later in the afternoon, they found a tree with broken branches. Nayeli touched them and recognized a familiar cut. My brother uses this style, she said. They passed here quickly. Caleb watched her eyes. There was hope, but also deep fear. As they rode farther, the land opened into a wide valley. From the top of the hill, Nayeli looked down and saw faint smoke in the distance. Her heart jumped. A campfire, she said softly. It must be them. Caleb narrowed his eyes, studying the direction. We'll approach carefully, he said. Just in case. They descended the hill slowly, staying near bushes and rocks. As they got closer, Nayeli felt her heart beating faster and faster. She could almost hear her people's voices. She could almost see her brother's face. But then, the wind changed direction. And a sound echoed through the valley. It wasn't a peaceful sound. It was sharp, tense, unfamiliar. Nayeli froze. Caleb placed his hand near his holster, not grabbing, just ready. Stay behind me, he whispered. Something was happening in the valley, something dangerous, and neither of them knew what they were about to find. Caleb and Nayeli stood still on the hill's slope, listening carefully to the strange sounds coming from the valley below. The wind carried bits of voices, but the distance made them unclear. Nayeli's heart raced as she tried to understand the noise. Her people were peaceful most of the time, but fear told her that something might have gone wrong. Caleb placed a steady hand near her shoulder, close enough to reassure her without crossing the line of respect he always kept. Stay close, he whispered. We'll move slowly. They guided their horses behind a row of low bushes, keeping hidden as they made their way down the hill. The air grew tense, and the wind felt heavier, as if the desert itself sensed something was not right. Nayeli's eyes kept darting back and forth, looking for anything that might give her answers. Caleb stayed calm, focused on protecting her first and understanding the situation second. As they reached the valley floor, they dismounted to avoid making noise. Caleb walked in front, moving carefully between the rocks, while Nayeli followed close behind. When they finally got a clear view, they spotted a camp near a fallen tree. Smoke drifted upward from a dying fire. At first, Nayeli thought it was her tribe's camp, and relief touched her face, but then she saw something that made her stop in fear. The camp was empty. Blankets lay on the ground, tools were left behind, and half-eaten food sat untouched on a wooden bowl. It looked as if the camp had been abandoned in a hurry. Nayeli felt her throat tighten, and she stepped forward anxiously, searching for a sign that her people were safe. But then she noticed footprints around the camp, many footprints. Some belonged to her tribe, but others did not. Caleb saw the worry in her expression and knelt to inspect the tracks. There were more than a few strangers here, he said quietly. Your people didn't leave by choice. They were forced to move. Nayeli's breath shook. Were they taken? Are they hurt? Caleb looked at the tracks again. It doesn't look like a fight happened. No signs of struggle, but they were definitely pushed to leave quickly. Maybe they were led somewhere. Nayeli's eyes filled with fear and confusion. She tried to stay strong, but the thought of her family facing danger without her brought a heavy ache to her chest. Caleb noticed her trembling hands and spoke gently. "We'll find them," he said. "You're not alone in this." Nayeli nodded, though her mind felt clouded with worry. She walked through the camp, touching familiar items: her tribe's cooking pot, her mother's woven basket, her brother's wooden spear. She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath, trying to sense where they might have gone. Her people had strong survival instincts. They would have tried to find safety. Caleb followed the deeper boot prints leading eastward. "The strangers went this way," he said, "and your people's tracks follow." They were guided, maybe even escorted. Nayeli stepped beside him, feeling a mix of fear and hope. Together, they continued on foot, leading the horses quietly. The path grew narrow between rocks, and the sounds of the morning faded behind them, leaving only the crunch of sand beneath their feet. After a long walk, they reached a small clearing where the land opened wider. Caleb stopped to look around, and then turned to Nayeli. He could tell she was barely holding her emotions inside. He knelt slightly so he could look at her directly. "Are you all right?" he asked in a soft voice. Nayeli tried to speak but struggled. She pressed her hand against her chest, feeling the weight of everything she had faced since the storm. Finally, she whispered, "I am afraid. I do not know if I will see them again. I feel weak." Caleb shook his head. "Weak? You've walked through the desert alone. You've guided us all this way. You're still moving forward when most would give up." His voice was steady, almost warm. "You're stronger than you think." Nayeli blinked back the tears that threatened to fall. She looked down at the ground, feeling her heart soften. "You do not know me," she said quietly. "I know enough," he replied. "I know courage when I see it." For a moment, neither spoke. The wind brushed past them gently. Something unspoken passed between them. A shared understanding, the kind only formed when two people face fear together. Then Nayeli broke the silence. "Why are you helping me this much? You could have let me go after one night." Caleb exhaled deeply, his gaze turning distant for a moment. "Because once, long ago, I didn't help someone when I should have. Someone needed me, and I came too late." His jaw tightened with old pain. "I told myself I would never let that happen again if I had the chance." Nayeli listened quietly. She realized this man carried a sadness she had never seen before. His calmness wasn't just strength. It was also a way of hiding pain. She looked at him differently now, with deeper understanding. "You have a good heart," she said softly. "My people believe that a heart is known more by its actions than its words. You act with kindness." Caleb gave a small, faint smile, rare but genuine. "Maybe so." They followed the trail again, moving toward the east until the sun climbed higher. The dry stream bed ahead showed clearer footprints. Nayeli bent down, touching one of the tracks gently. "This is my brother's," she said. Her voice shook with emotion, but it carried hope. Caleb felt relief seeing her confidence grow. Then, "We're close." But just as hope began to rise, they heard distant voices behind the next ridge. Caleb raised his hand, signaling for Nayeli to stay low. They hid behind a cluster of rocks. Caleb slowly peeked over the edge, watching the movement near a group of trees below. What he saw made him exhale in relief. There were people there. Apache people, gathered together. They looked unharmed, just tired and tense. Nayeli followed Caleb's gaze and gasped softly. She placed her hand over her mouth, her eyes filling with tears of joy. "My people," she whispered. "I have found them." But as she was about to stand, Caleb caught her wrist gently. His touch was careful, respectful. "Wait," he said. "We need to be sure everything is peaceful. I don't see the strangers anymore. They might have just escorted them to this safer place." Nayeli nodded, calming herself. They moved slowly toward the group. When the Apache people noticed movement, they turned sharply, ready to defend themselves. But when Nayeli stepped forward into the light, calling her brother's name, everything changed. A young Apache man ran toward her, calling her name with relief and disbelief. He embraced her tightly, overwhelmed with joy that she was alive. The tribe gathered around, touching her hair, her hands, asking if she was hurt. Nayeli felt love surround her again. But she also felt something confusing. She kept looking back at Caleb, who stood a short distance away, respectful as always, ready to leave if she was safe. Her father arrived last, his expression a mix of sternness and relief. He placed his hand on her shoulder and looked at her with eyes that spoke volumes. "You are safe," he said in a deep voice. Nayeli nodded, but her heart felt heavy for a different reason. She looked at Caleb again. He stepped forward humbly, giving her people space. "She's strong," he said simply. "She guided us here." Her father studied Caleb for a long moment. Then, he nodded. "Thank you," he said. "You have done an honorable thing." Caleb bowed his head slightly, ready to walk away. Nayeli watched him, and an ache grew inside her. She wasn't ready to say goodbye. Not yet. Not after everything they had faced together. Not after how deeply she had come to trust him. As Caleb turned to leave, Nayeli took a step forward, her voice trembling but clear. "Wait." Everything was changing again right before her eyes. Caleb paused when he heard her voice. It was soft, but it carried across the quiet valley with surprising strength. Nayeli's people looked at her in confusion, wondering why she called out to the cowboy instead of rejoining her tribe completely. Caleb turned halfway, unsure if she truly meant for him to stop or if it was only her emotions speaking after a long and difficult journey. But when he saw her eyes, he understood. She truly wanted him to stay at least for this moment. Nayeli's father watched her step forward. The other members of the tribe stepped aside, giving her space as she approached Caleb slowly. Her heart pounded, not from fear but from something deeper, something she could not fully explain even to herself. She had returned to her people, yes, but in that same moment, she felt something else, something pulling her toward the cowboy who had guided her, protected her, and believed in her when she felt lost. Caleb stood still, dust clinging to his boots, his hat lightly tilted forward. He was ready to leave, ready to step out of her life so she could return to her world. But the look in her eyes made him set aside the thought of departure. She came close enough for him to hear her breath. "I want to thank you," Nayeli said softly, "for everything." Caleb lowered his gaze, unsure how to respond. "You don't owe me anything," he said. "I just did what anyone with sense and a heart would do." Nayeli shook her head slowly. "No. Not everyone would do what you did. You gave me shelter when I was a stranger. You helped me, even though our worlds are different. And you did it without asking for anything." Her words were simple, but they carried weight. Caleb felt something tighten in his chest. He had tried to keep himself distant, tried not to grow too close. But he realized now that her presence had softened places in his heart he thought were long hardened. Her father walked closer, stopping a few feet away. He studied Caleb with steady eyes, as if trying to understand the cowboy's spirit. Finally, he spoke. "We are grateful for what you have done," the father said. "You helped my daughter when she was alone. You protected her when the desert could have taken her life." Caleb nodded respectfully, not expecting anything in return. "I only did what was right," he replied. "She's strong." Nayeli's father looked at her, noticing the way she kept glancing at the cowboy with a soft expression one he hadn't seen before. He understood something unspoken had formed between them during their journey. "You may stay with us for food and rest," her father offered. "You are welcome in our circle today." It was a rare gesture. Caleb knew that invitations like this were not given lightly. "Thank you," he said sincerely. The tribe gathered near the campfire. Some were preparing food. Others arranged blankets. Nayeli joined them, but kept turning her eyes toward Caleb, who stood quietly at the edge of the camp. When her father saw her distraction, he walked up to her and spoke in a calm, firm voice. "Child," he said, "this cowboy is not from our world, but he showed you care when he had no reason to." He paused, reading her expression. "If something inside you is tied to him, you must understand it honestly." Nayeli lowered her gaze, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. "I don't know what it is," she whispered. "But when I was lost, and when I was scared, he made me feel safe. When he promised he would help me, I believed him. And I still do." Her father placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Then speak from your heart. A heart that hides too much becomes heavy." Nayeli swallowed hard. She knew he was right. After the tribe prepared food, Caleb was invited to sit with them. He accepted with quiet politeness, not wanting to intrude but understanding the honor they gave him. Nayeli sat near her brother, but she couldn't help glancing Caleb's way. The entire tribe noticed Caleb kept his eyes on the fire instead of looking at anyone directly. He didn't want to make them uncomfortable, yet he didn't want to seem cold either. When the food was offered, Nayeli's father insisted Caleb take the first bowl. Caleb bowed his head with respect and accepted it only after making sure others were also served. The tribe watched him closely, noticing his humility. He did not act with pride or arrogance. He carried himself simply, the way a man with true heart would. After the meal, the fire crackled softly, and the sky turned darker with night approaching. Stars began appearing one by one. The tribe settled into calm conversation. Meanwhile, Caleb quietly stood and walked toward his horse, feeling it was time to leave. He touched the horse's neck and tightened the saddle straps. Nayeli saw him preparing to go. Something inside her dropped, as if a rope pulling her toward him was sinking deeper. She rose quickly and walked toward him, her steps soft but determined. Caleb heard her and turned slightly. "You're leaving already?" she asked. Caleb nodded. "You're safe now," he said. "Your people are safe. My work is done." Nayeli stepped closer. The firelight flickered behind her, making her face glow gently. "But I don't want you to leave yet." Caleb exhaled, looking away for a moment. "You belong with them," he said. "This is your home. I'm just someone who passed through when you needed help." And Nayeli shook her head. "You are not just someone. You were the reason I survived. You were the reason I didn't lose hope." Caleb felt a tightness in his throat. He wasn't used to hearing such honest words. He didn't know what to do with them. He took off his hat, holding it against his chest. "You're strong," he said. "Stronger than you know. You would have made it even without me." Nayeli stepped even closer. "Maybe. But the night you gave me shelter, it changed something inside me. I felt safe in a place where I was before only afraid. I felt seen." Caleb swallowed hard. He didn't know how to reply. He felt something too, something he hadn't let himself admit, something he didn't think he deserved to feel. Nayeli's father watched from a distance, saying nothing. He understood that the world was wide, and sometimes hearts connected in unexpected ways. Finally, Nayeli took a slow breath. "If you leave now," she whispered, "I will always wonder what might have happened if you stayed just a little longer." Caleb looked into her eyes. They held innocence, gratitude, and a quiet strength. He set his hat back on his head. But this time, he didn't turn away. "I can stay," he said softly. "Not forever, but for a little while longer." if that's what you want. Nayeli nodded, relief filling her entire body. Caleb tied his horse to a nearby tree and followed her back to the fire. The tribe watched him return at her side. Her father nodded once, accepting the cowboys' place near their circle for the night. As the sky darkened fully, the stars spread across the heavens like scattered diamonds. The fire warmed the air around them. Caleb sat near Nayeli, both silent, but comfortable. Their shoulders didn't touch, yet it felt like something invisible connected them. Nayeli looked at him with a gentle smile, the first true smile since the storm. Caleb returned a small, almost shy smile of his own. The night was quiet, peaceful, but full of new beginnings. Two different worlds sat side by side, not struggling against their differences, but growing because of the kindness that started everything. And as the fire crackled softly, Caleb realized something deep. That one night he gave her shelter didn't just change her life. It changed his too.